One sentence, spoken without anger, almost in passing, split life into before and after. No thunder, no drama. Just a cold silence in which love quietly vanished. And with it, so did he. But while one person was erasing the past, the other began piecing himself back together. Not to win anything back, not to prove a point, but to remember the sound of his own voice in absolute quiet. To feel that the heart still beats, even when no one hears it anymore. Sometimes rebirth doesn't begin with a scream, but with the stillness of morning and a single step away from the familiar. And that is where everything real begins. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. I can still recall the exact moment those words escaped her lips. Not tonight, or any night. The finality in her voice sent a chill through my spine. After 6 years of marriage, though things had been tense for a while, I never imagined hearing such an unequivocal statement about our intimacy. That evening had been like so many before it. I came home from work, we shared dinner while making small talk, then settled into our usual routine, her engrossed in her phone, me staring at the television. When I leaned in to kiss her neck, a gesture that once made her smile instinctively, she recoiled. "Don't," she said, eyes never leaving her screen. "I'm not in the mood." "You haven't been in the mood for weeks," I replied, struggling to keep the edge out of my voice. "Is something wrong?" She finally put her phone down and met my gaze, then shattered my reality with one brutal sentence. "Not tonight or any night. I'm done with that part of our relationship." My mind scrambled for a response, but I found myself frozen. How do you react when your partner abruptly declares that physical intimacy is no longer part of your marriage? No warning, no discussion, just a unilateral decision that rewrote the foundation of our relationship in an instant. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, desperate to believe I had misunderstood. Exactly what I said. Her voice was calm, detached. "I've thought about this for a long time. I value what we have, our home, our friends, the stability, but I no longer want physical intimacy. You can accept that or not. The choice is yours." A flood of memories rushed through my mind. The fiery passion of our early years, the gradual cooling, the mounting excuses, the way she stiffened at my touch in recent months. The signs had been there, yet I had clung to the hope that things would eventually return to normal. "Is there someone else?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I hated myself for falling into such a tired suspicion. She let out a short, almost amused laugh. "No, this isn't about another person. It's not even about you. I've just moved beyond that part of my life." That answer stung more than an admission of infidelity would have. If she had been unfaithful, I could have directed my pain toward betrayal, made her the villain of our story. But this? How do you fight against indifference? The days that followed felt surreal. We continued our routines, meals, brief conversations, shared television, but an invisible wall separated us. She acted as if her revelation had been nothing more than an offhand remark, as if she had merely informed me of a change in diet, rather than reshaping the dynamics of our marriage. I suggested therapy. "We don't need therapy," she dismissed the idea instantly. "There's nothing wrong with me, and I won't be coerced into something I don't want." And she was right. No one should be forced into intimacy. But her complete unwillingness to acknowledge the shift in our marriage made her feel like a stranger inhabiting my wife's body. At night, I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts tangled. Had I been so absorbed in work that I failed to notice her drifting away? Or had she concealed her feelings until she had no choice but to voice them? One thing became painfully clear. I was in a marriage where I was neither desired nor needed in any meaningful way. I had become a convenience, A financial partner, a social companion, a cohabitant, maintaining the illusion of a functional marriage. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting in my car outside our home, reluctant to walk through the door. What awaited me inside? Another evening of polite detachment with a woman who had unilaterally rewritten the rules of our relationship? Then it struck me. I had a choice. I could remain in this emotional wasteland, clinging to the illusion of change, or I could redirect my energy toward something, or someone, that offered growth. By the time I finally stepped inside, a plan had already begun to form. Not out of vengeance, not in search of a dramatic confrontation, but from a place of self-preservation. If she had moved on emotionally while staying, perhaps I could do the same. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I needed answers. 6 years of shared history couldn't simply dissolve without explanation. "Can we talk?" I asked, as she calmly spread avocado on her toast, her morning routine unchanged despite the storm that had upended our marriage. "We're talking now," she replied coolly, not bothering to meet my eyes. "I mean really talk. About us. About what you said." She exhaled slowly, setting her knife down with calculated precision. "There's nothing more to discuss." "But you haven't explained why," I persisted, my voice even. "Was it something I did? Something I failed to do? People don't just wake up one day and decide to change their marriage so drastically." "I didn't just wake up and decide this," she snapped, the first fracture in her composed facade. "I've felt this way for months. Maybe if you had been paying attention, you would have noticed." Her words cut deep. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been too preoccupied with work and routine to see the slow unraveling of our life together. Or maybe, no matter how much attention I had given, this was always where we were destined to end up. The remark stung more than I wanted to acknowledge because deep down, I knew there was truth in it. I had been putting in longer hours, shouldering extra tasks, all in the hopes of earning a promotion. I had convinced myself it was for us, for our future. But if I was honest, I wasn't entirely sure that was the whole truth. "Then let's work on this together," I suggested. "Counseling, date nights, whatever it takes. Just tell me what you need." She regarded me with an expression that bordered on pity. "What I need is for you to accept that my decision is final. I don't want to fix anything because, from my perspective, nothing is broken. This is just what I want now. And what about me?" The words left my mouth with more edge than I had intended. "You're free to want whatever you like," she said evenly. "But I won't pretend or force myself into something I no longer feel." It was like talking to a wall. No matter how I tried to approach the situation, the conversation went nowhere. A week later, still holding on to hope, I booked a session with a marriage counselor, thinking that maybe a professional could help her see things differently. "I'm not going," she said flatly when I brought it up. "If you need therapy to process this, then go by yourself." So I did. The therapist, a kind woman in her 50s, listened attentively as I poured out my frustration and confusion. "Has she experienced any recent trauma or major life changes?" she asked gently. "Not that I can think of," I admitted. "Her job is stable, no significant losses, no health scares, nothing obvious." She nodded, considering my words. "Sometimes shifts like these stem from unresolved emotions or internal changes. But since she isn't here, I can only help you navigate your own feelings." That was when the realization struck me with full force. I was the only one still fighting for this marriage. She had already checked out emotionally. The only thing keeping her here was familiarity, the ease of a life we had built together. At home, we maintained the facade. We still ate dinner together, socialized with friends who remained oblivious, and played the part of a functional couple. But behind closed doors, we were nothing more than two people occupying the same space. There were no lingering touches, no warmth, none of the instinctive gestures that couples accumulate over the years. Gradually, I started to pick up on the subtler changes. She rarely initiated conversation anymore. When she did ask about my day, it felt more like a forced courtesy than genuine interest. If I asked about hers, the responses were brief and indifferent. It was as if she had carved out a separate existence, one that ran alongside mine but never truly intersected. I had become a fixture in her life, present but inconsequential. One evening, a friend made a passing comment about what a great couple we were, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. A great couple? We were barely more than strangers, clinging to the illusion of what once was. That night, as I lay awake at 2 a.m., I had to confront some painful truths. I was holding on to something that was already gone. The woman lying next to me wasn't the same one who had once looked at me with love and longing. Or maybe she was, and it was simply her feelings that had changed. Worse, I realized I had let her decision dictate my own self-worth. Every day I spent waiting, hoping she would change her mind, was a day I lost a little more respect for myself. 3 months into this painful reality, I watched her get ready for a night out with her friends. She carefully applied makeup, something she hadn't done for me in a long time. "You look nice," I said, testing the waters. "Thanks," she replied, without even glancing up. That moment brought everything into sharp focus. I had become invisible to her in every way that mattered. As she walked out the door, I sat alone in the living room, considering my choices. I could continue like this, existing on the bare minimum of human connection. I could leave, dismantling the comfortable routine we had built. Or I could take a different approach. At first, the thought was barely more than a whisper, an instinct rather than a fully formed plan. But as I mulled it over, it started to solidify. If she could emotionally detach while keeping up appearances, maybe I could too. Not out of bitterness or spite, but simply as a way to survive. The next morning, I woke before dawn, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of purpose. I decided to shift my focus, not to win her back, but to reclaim myself. It began with small, deliberate steps. I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m., an hour before she usually woke. That quiet time became mine alone. I started with 20 minutes of meditation, something I had always dismissed as impractical. But in that stillness, I found a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. The endless loop of thoughts about my failing marriage began to fade. Then came exercise. Nothing drastic, just push-ups, sit-ups, and a short run around the neighborhood. By the time she emerged from the bedroom, I was already showered, dressed, and sitting at the kitchen table with a book and a cup of coffee. "You're up early," she remarked on the third morning, catching sight of me. "Just making some changes," I replied lightly, offering no further explanation. She didn't ask for one. The following week, I signed up for a gym near my office. Instead of rushing home to an atmosphere that had become suffocating, I spent an hour working out. With each repetition, I felt myself letting go of resentment and self-pity, chipping away at the weight that had been dragging me down. I also reached out to old friends I had unintentionally neglected over the years. There were no dramatic confessions, no lamenting over my failing marriage, just casual lunches, after-work drinks, and rediscovering the connections I had let slip away. These moments weren't about her, they were about me, about remembering who I was outside of our relationship. At home, I remained polite but detached. Little by little, I was reclaiming my life. When she spoke, I listened, but no longer with the same urgency. Her words no longer anchored me, nor did I wait idly for stolen moments of acknowledgement when she busied herself elsewhere. Instead, I redirected my focus inward. I immersed myself in books I had meant to read for years and signed up for online courses I had endlessly postponed. A month into this shift, the first signs of transformation stared back at me from the mirror. Daily workouts began carving definition into muscles long neglected, my posture straightened, and the weight of persistent tension lifted from my shoulders. But the most striking change was in my gaze, sharper, clearer, and brimming with an energy I hadn't seen in myself since the day she delivered her decision. The transformation extended beyond my physical self. I refined my wardrobe, not with ostentatious purchases or desperate reinvention, but with well-fitted clothes that complemented my changing physique. Confidence radiated subtly in the way I carried myself. When I wore a new shirt to a dinner with friends, the compliments came unbidden. Even she noticed but chose not to say a word. Yet one morning, as I dressed for work, I caught her watching me with a slight crease between her brows, a flicker of uncertainty, as if she struggled to reconcile this version of me with the one she had so easily overlooked. My evolution reached into my finances as well. Though our accounts had always been separate except for a shared one for household expenses, I reconsidered how I spent my own money. The extravagant watch I had planned to buy her for our anniversary? I abandoned the idea, choosing instead to invest in a photography workshop, a passion I had abandoned years before. That decision led me outside, to the serenity of pre-dawn hikes where I captured landscapes bathed in golden morning light. These outings became a form of meditation, an escape where nothing mattered except the interplay of color and shadow. Sharing my work online connected me with fellow photographers, and soon a modest community formed, people who saw the world as I did, one frame at a time. One evening, after weeks of my new weekend ritual, she finally asked, "Where have you been going so early on Saturdays?" "Taking photos," I replied. She frowned slightly. "Since when do you do photography?" "I've always loved it. I just never had the time before." She hesitated, as though tempted to ask more, but held back. Or maybe she simply refused to acknowledge an aspect of my life that she had already dismissed. At work, my clarity yielded results. I tackled projects with renewed determination, my confidence apparent in ways that had been absent during months of emotional limbo. My boss took notice. "Whatever you're doing, keep at it," he said, after I delivered a particularly compelling strategy. "You're on fire." His words meant more than I expected. After months of feeling unseen at home, professional validation filled the void. Not entirely, but enough to push me forward. By the third month of this transformation, I slept more soundly, carried myself with certainty, and excelled in nearly every domain of my life, except my marriage, which had become little more than a formality, an existence of parallel lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her distance had unknowingly forced me to become the best version of myself. One evening, as I prepared to leave for a photography meetup, she posed a question I hadn't anticipated. "Are you seeing someone else?" I paused at the door, my camera bag slung over my shoulder. "No." "Then why does it feel like you're never here?" The irony almost made me laugh. "I'm just investing my time in things that fulfill me," I said, echoing her own detached reasoning. "Isn't that what you wanted?" She had no response. I left without waiting for one. Driving away, I realized something fundamental had changed. I no longer clung to the hope that she would reconsider. My life was no longer centered around earning her approval. 4 months into my transformation, the impact was undeniable, not just to me, but to everyone around me. One morning, my boss called me into his office with news that might have once been the highlight of my year. "We're promoting you to senior manager," he announced. "Your performance has been outstanding. Whatever's fueling you, keep it up." I thanked him, fully aware that this success stemmed from shifting my energy into work instead of an unreciprocated marriage. The substantial raise that accompanied the promotion opened new possibilities. That evening, I shared the news over dinner, uncertain of her reaction. "That's great," she said, but then hesitated. "Does this mean longer hours?" "Possibly," I replied, studying her carefully. "Why? Does it matter?" She pushed her food around her plate. "Of course it matters. We barely see each other as it is." The irony struck deep. "Funny," I mused. "I didn't think that was an issue. Not given our arrangement." She sighed, her voice quieter. Just because we agreed to something doesn't mean I want to live with a stranger. I set my fork down deliberately. Interesting, because ever since you redefined our marriage on your terms, I've been living with one. And now that I've adapted, that's a problem? She had no answer. We finished our meal in silence. Later that night, I transferred half of my promotion bonus into our joint account for household expenses. The rest, I invested. This time, in a future that belonged entirely to me. My finances were no longer stagnant. They were actively shaping the course of my future. And with each passing day, I envisioned that future less and less with her in it. At the same time, my physical transformation was accelerating. One evening, after a particularly grueling workout, the gym manager approached me. "Ever thought about competing?" he asked. I let out a small laugh, assuming he was joking, but his expression remained serious. "There's an amateur fitness competition coming up. It's not a big deal, but plenty of guys with less experience than you are signing up. You've got the dedication and the physique for it. 6 months earlier, the mere thought would have seemed absurd. But now? Now, I was intrigued. I pressed him for details, and by the end of our conversation, my name was on the registration list. The competition gave my training new purpose, goals that extended beyond simply escaping my home life. My workout partner, Robert, a divorced guy with a quick wit, had become someone I could confide in. After weeks of training together, I finally shared a carefully filtered version of my situation. "So she just completely checked out of that part of your marriage?" he asked, clearly baffled. "Pretty much. And you're still there because—" It was a question I had avoided answering for far too long. Habit, I suppose. Maybe a lingering hope that things might change, though that hope is disappearing fast. Robert shook his head. "Man, life's too short. My ex and I had our battles, but at least we cared enough to fight. What you're describing isn't a marriage. It's a legally binding roommate situation." His bluntness was refreshing. Most people tried to offer empty reassurances, failing to grasp that my marriage hadn't hit a temporary rough patch. It had morphed into something else entirely. Meanwhile, my photography hobby was evolving into something more significant. A local gallery owner stumbled upon my work online and invited me to contribute to a group exhibition. Seeing my photos professionally printed and displayed on a gallery wall felt surreal, a tangible representation of just how much my life had shifted in a matter of months. I invited a few friends to the exhibit but deliberately kept it from my wife. That's why I was caught off guard when she showed up, looking slightly out of place among the art crowd. "These are really good," she said, standing before one of my sunrise landscapes. "I had no idea you were this talented." I met her gaze. "There's a lot about me you don't know anymore. Or maybe never knew." Before she could respond, a woman from the gallery walked over. "Your husband has an incredible eye," she told my wife. "We've already sold 3 of his pieces tonight." My wife's expression barely shifted, though I noticed the slight widening of her eyes. "That's great," she said, though her voice carried more confusion than pride. Later that night, as we drove home separately, I had come straight from work, I thought about her reaction. Was she genuinely interested in my photography, or was she merely taken aback by the realization that I had built something outside of her orbit? At home, we had settled into an efficient but distant cohabitation. We coordinated schedules when needed, split household duties, and handled shared expenses. But the emotional connection was long gone, and, to my own surprise, I no longer mourned its absence the way I once had. When the fitness competition finally arrived, I placed 3rd in my category. Standing on that podium with a medal around my neck, I felt a deep sense of validation, not because I needed anyone's approval, but because it was undeniable proof of how far I had come from the man who had once sat in our living room, broken and disoriented. After the event, a few women approached me, making it clear they were interested. I responded politely, but kept my distance. I wasn't ready for anything new. Still, their attention reminded me of something I had nearly forgotten. I was desirable. I could attract genuine interest. I was worthy of affection. That night, as I placed my medal in a drawer, my wife passed by our bedroom door. She hesitated. "Congratulations," she said. "I saw the photos your friend posted online." "Thanks," I replied, closing the drawer. She lingered for a moment before asking, "Are you happy with all these changes?" I considered the question carefully. I'm happier than I was when I spent my days trying to understand why my wife suddenly decided I wasn't worth touching anymore. So yeah, relatively speaking, I'm happy. She flinched at the honesty. That's not fair. I met her gaze. None of this has been fair. But we adapt. You distanced yourself from me, and I'm redirecting toward a better version of myself. She didn't argue. Instead, she simply turned and walked away. And as I watched her disappear down the hall, I understood something crucial. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This wasn't just a means of coping. This was a path. And it was leading me somewhere new. 6 months later, that realization crystallized during a company retreat. My team had gathered at a quiet lakeside resort for a weekend of strategy meetings and team bonding. After a long day of discussions, we relaxed around a fire pit, swapping stories and laughter under the stars. Anna, a marketing team member who had joined the company 3 months prior, took a seat beside me. "You know, when I first started, everyone told me how lucky I was to be working with you," she said, her voice low enough that only I could hear. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And why's that?" "They said you completely transformed the department, but they also mentioned something else." She tilted her head slightly. "That you've changed. A lot." I exhaled, staring into the fire. They weren't wrong, and for the first time, I wasn't looking back. I was only looking ahead. She hesitated before speaking again. "They mentioned you used to be withdrawn, almost somber. That doesn't quite match the person I've gotten to know." I watched the fire dance, weighing my response. Let's just say I had my share of challenges. Eventually, I decided to focus on what I could control rather than dwell on what I couldn't. She considered my words carefully. "Well, whatever you did, it made a difference. You seem completely at ease now." As the conversation stretched into the night, I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't in a long time. Anna had a keen intellect and a sharp wit that caught me off guard more than once. We quickly discovered shared interests, photography and hiking among them. She seemed genuinely intrigued when I showed her some of my recent shots on my phone. "You've got real talent," she said, leaning in to scroll through my gallery. "These deserve a wider audience." The fleeting contact of her shoulder against mine sent an unexpected jolt through me, a stark reminder of how long it had been since I'd felt even casual closeness. Unsettled, I shifted slightly away. As the evening wound down and the group began dispersing toward their cabins, Anna matched her pace with mine on the trail. "A few of us are heading out early to catch the sunrise before the meetings start. You should come. The light will be perfect for the kind of landscapes you love." I agreed, and the next morning, I stood on a ridge alongside Anna and 2 colleagues, watching as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. I snapped dozens of photos, yet my lens kept drifting back to Anna, her silhouette striking against the luminous horizon. By Sunday evening, I returned home to find my wife in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, a rare occurrence in recent months. "How was the retreat?" she asked, her tone unusually attentive. "Productive," I said, setting my bag down. "We finalized the strategy for next quarter." She nodded slightly before adding, "I saw some of the pictures you posted. Beautiful location." "It was," I replied, noting her sudden interest. Her gaze lingered on me. "The woman in some of them, does she work with you?" Her question caught me off guard. I hadn't realized how frequently Anna had appeared in my photos. "That's Anna. She's our new marketing specialist," I answered evenly. "She's very attractive," my wife remarked, watching my reaction. I shrugged, hadn't really noticed. The lie felt reflexive, but the look in her eyes told me she wasn't convinced. Really? She challenged, raising an eyebrow. You've posted at least a dozen photos where she's in the frame. Choosing my words carefully, I responded, she just happened to be part of the group activities. Then, after a beat, I asked, why do you mention it? She turned back to the stove. Just curious about your co-workers, that's all. But something in her voice hinted at something more, perhaps a flicker of unease, or even jealousy. It felt strange, given the emotional distance she had maintained between us for so long. In the weeks that followed, subtle changes in her behavior emerged. She asked more about my day, cooked occasionally, even suggested a movie night one Friday. Months ago, I might have welcomed the attention. Now, it only left me bewildered. At work, Anna and I collaborated closely on a major campaign. Her creativity meshed effortlessly with my strategic approach, and the project gained rapid momentum. Late nights became routine, and our dynamic evolved into something fluid, almost effortless. We shared takeout meals, exchanged personal stories between deadlines, and despite my best efforts, I couldn't ignore how much I enjoyed her presence. She listened, really listened, and for the first time in a long while, I felt understood. One evening, long after the office had emptied, Anna turned to me, her expression unusually serious. Can I ask you something personal? I nodded, though a flicker of hesitation passed through me. Are you happy? She asked quietly. Outside of work, I mean. Her question caught me off guard. It's complicated, I admitted after a pause. I've noticed you never talk about your personal life, she continued. You mention your hobbies, your workouts, your investments, but never your relationships. I hesitated before giving a partial truth. My marriage has been difficult. We feel more like roommates than partners. Her expression reflected concern, but not pity, a distinction that mattered. I'm sorry, she said sincerely. You deserve more than that. Her words hit harder than I expected. Not a cliché, not a suggestion to fix things, just an acknowledgement that my situation was less than what I should accept. Driving home, her words echoed in my mind. Did I deserve better? For so long, I had been so focused on deciphering my wife's emotional withdrawal, adapting to it, that I had never fully considered whether I should accept it at all. When I arrived, my wife was still awake, an uncommon occurrence. You've been working late a lot, she noted as I placed my keys on the counter. Big campaign, I replied. It's going well. With Anna? She asked, her tone carefully measured. I met her gaze. Yes. She's leading the creative side. She hesitated before voicing what had likely been weighing on her for weeks. She looks at you the way I used to. And you look happier in those photos with her than you have around here in a long time. Her words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. In that moment, there was no need for denial or deflection. The truth was already laid bare between us. Neither an admission of guilt nor a plea for understanding. Something more elusive than both. A realization of a shifting truth, one we had not yet put into words. We need to talk, I said, cutting through the weighty silence that had settled between us. Really talk. Not the polite exchanges we've been skimming the surface with for months. She met my gaze with an unreadable expression, then nodded. We relocated to the living room, the very space where, what seemed like another lifetime, she had drawn the line that severed the physical aspect of our marriage. Now, we faced each other, bound by shared obligations, mortgages, schedules, responsibilities, but little else. Are you involved with someone? She asked, her voice steady, yet taut with tension. No, I answered without hesitation. I've never broken my vows. But you've thought about it, she pressed. For a brief moment, I considered dodging the question. Instead, I chose to be truthful. I've been thinking about many things, about what marriage becomes when one person unilaterally redefines it, about whether a life without intimacy or connection is something I can endure, about whether I am truly living or merely existing. She lowered her gaze, staring at her hands. So you're retaliating by reinventing yourself and flirting with your coworker? The words didn't sting the way they once might have. Instead, they sharpened something I had struggled to put into focus. This was never about revenge, I said calmly. It's about survival. When you told me, not tonight, not ever, you weren't just rejecting physical closeness. You were rejecting me, as your partner, as someone you desired. That's not fair, she countered, her voice carrying a quiet edge. I never stopped caring about you. Caring isn't the same as loving, I replied. You wanted to hold on to the familiar aspects of our marriage while casting aside the rest. And I tried. I really did. I tried to adjust, to compromise, to respect your decision without losing myself in the process. I exhaled, gathering my thoughts before continuing. This transformation isn't about making you jealous. It isn't about anyone else either. It's about reclaiming the parts of myself that withered under the weight of your withdrawal. She was silent for a long moment. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear, she admitted, I didn't think it would affect you this much. I thought we could just continue. The casual cruelty of that realization stunned me. How could you believe that? Marriage isn't a collection of conveniences. You don't get to pick what you want and discard the rest. People change, she said defensively. Feelings evolve. At least I was honest instead of pretending. Yes, you were honest, I acknowledged. And so am I. The man who sat here devastated months ago? He doesn't exist anymore. The changes I've made aren't temporary or reactionary. They are real. I know my worth now, and I refuse to settle for scraps of affection. A single tear slipped down her cheek, the first raw emotion I had seen from her in what felt like an eternity. So you're leaving me for her? She asked, her voice trembling. I shook my head. This isn't about Anna or anyone else. This is about us. About what's been broken, and whether it can be repaired. And can it? She whispered. The weight of the question settled between us. Despite everything, we had built a life together, woven through years of shared laughter, struggles, and dreams. Walking away wouldn't be simple nor painless. I don't know, I admitted. But I do know this. I can't go back to how things were. I won't pretend your decision didn't change the foundation of our marriage, and I won't apologize for becoming someone stronger in the process. She wiped her eyes, regaining her composure. So what now? Now we make decisions based on truth, not nostalgia or convenience. You redirected your emotional energy away from us. That was your choice. I chose to reinvest in myself. That was mine. I took a deep breath. Now, we both have to decide whether there's anything left here worth rebuilding, or if we've grown too far apart. And if I want to try? She asked, surprising me with the flicker of hope in her voice. Then you have to understand that we can't undo what's been done. There's no erasing this, no pretending it never happened. If we move forward, it has to be toward something new, something that acknowledges who we've both become. She nodded slowly, absorbing my words. And if I can't give you what you need? The question was raw, maybe the most honest she had been in months. It deserved an equally honest answer. Then we part ways, I said, with kindness, with respect for what we once were. That night, we spoke for hours, unraveling the knots of resentment and miscommunication. She confessed to struggles with self-image, how they had contributed to her withdrawal. I admitted how deeply her rejection had wounded my sense of self-worth and desirability. There were no dramatic resolutions, no sudden reconciliations. Just two people finally confronting the gulf between them and asking whether it could still be bridged. By morning, we had made a painful but necessary choice, a trial separation. Not as a prelude to divorce, but as space for both of us to rediscover, individually, what we truly wanted and whether our future still included each other. That weekend, I moved into a furnished apartment. Arranging my new space was unexpectedly liberating. For the first time in years, I was shaping an environment that reflected who I had become, not the relationship I had left behind. A fortnight after we had parted ways, my wife reached out with a message, suggesting we meet for coffee. We agreed on a neutral location, neither our old home nor my current apartment, but a quiet cafe that lay at an equal distance between us. When she walked in, I noticed a subtle shift in her demeanor. While my own changes had been more outwardly apparent, she exuded a newfound attentiveness, a quiet awareness that hadn't been there before. "I've been reflecting a lot," she said once we had maneuvered through the initial awkwardness of seeing each other again, "about what you told me, the way I altered our marriage without ever really giving you a voice in the matter." I remained silent, giving her the space to speak freely. "You were right," she admitted. "I made a decision that reshaped both of our lives, but I never stopped to fully consider what that meant for you. That was unfair. It was disrespectful." Her honesty was striking, though it would have carried more weight if it had come sooner. Still, I acknowledged her words with a quiet, "I appreciate you saying that." She let out a slow breath, her hands wrapped securely around her coffee cup. "There's something else," she continued. "Seeing you change, watching you become more self-assured, more ambitious, it forced me to confront something in myself. I've been standing still, not just in our relationship, but in every aspect of my life." She hesitated before admitting, "I envied you." I raised an eyebrow, prompting her to clarify. "Not because of Anna or anyone else, but because you found something, your drive, your purpose. You were moving forward, and I was just stuck." Her candor took me by surprise. "So what does that mean for us?" I asked. She held my gaze, her expression steady. "I don't have that answer yet. But I've started therapy. I'm trying to figure out my own path. Whether that leads us back to each other or in completely different directions, I needed you to know. You were the one who showed me that change is possible." We sat there for almost an hour, speaking with more openness than we had in over a year. And as we finally said our goodbyes, I came to a realization. This journey of mine had brought me full circle. What had once been a desperate attempt to survive the pain of emotional neglect had evolved into something far greater, an honest pursuit of self-understanding. And that path was still unfolding, regardless of what became of my marriage. As I walked back to my car, I felt neither triumph nor loss. Instead, there was something deeper, peace. I no longer needed affirmation from another person to define me. I had reclaimed my sense of self, and whatever the future held, I knew I was ready to meet it head-on. This story has come to an end. Sometimes the most painful losses aren't betrayal or divorce. They're indifference. When no one yells, no one leaves, you're simply no longer seen. But it's in those quiet moments that a person has a chance, not to break, but to grow. The true value of a relationship lies in mutuality, respect, and the desire to be together, not just exist side by side. And if someone chooses to exit emotionally, the key is not to cling, but to turn inward. Because love for another is impossible without respect for yourself. Real transformation begins the moment you choose yourself, not out of revenge, but out of dignity. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. Everything was perfect. Or at least, it seemed that way. He believed in her, in them, in the idea that love could withstand anything. But one day, his wife didn't come home on time. Then she started ignoring his calls. And soon after, she began to lie. Little things, small details. But together, they formed a disturbing pattern. One lie hid another, and then came the moment he heard a phrase he was never meant to hear. And just like that, everything collapsed. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. Even now, a week later, I find it hard to make sense of the terrifying ordeal I went through. It's surreal, like something that should have happened to someone else, not me. But life has a cruel way of flipping your world upside down when you least expect it. Let me give you some context. Marissa and I had been married a little over a year. On the surface, we looked like the picture-perfect couple. But if that were the full truth, you wouldn't be hearing this. So let's go back to where everything started. It's the only way this will make any kind of sense. The nightmare kicked off in October, just after Marissa landed a big promotion at work. I was genuinely thrilled for her. She had earned it, no question. The boost in pay didn't hurt either. But the new role came with a catch. She'd be working in a different office, farther from home, with a brand new team of colleagues. At first, I thought the change might actually be good for her. A fresh start, maybe. But it didn't take long before I started noticing shifts, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. The timing couldn't have been worse on my end. As a software developer, I was buried under year-end projects and deadlines. My workload was crushing, and I threw myself into it, thinking if I just powered through, it would benefit both of us. But while I was drowning in code and conference calls, Marissa was slipping further away. She started spending more time with her new coworkers, particularly a tight circle of women she seemed to click with instantly. They always had something going on: happy hours, birthday parties, casual get-togethers. In the beginning, I shrugged it off. I didn't want to be that husband, the one who hovers or gets jealous. But the late nights started piling up, and soon I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The first real red flag came one chilly evening in November. Marissa didn't come home when she usually did, and I couldn't get through to her. Calls went unanswered, texts ignored. My mind ran wild with terrible scenarios. When she finally walked through the door just before midnight, she looked disoriented and unsettled. "Where were you?" I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as I could. "I'm really sorry, Travis," she said, her tone slightly slurred, like she'd had a few drinks. "It was Rebecca's birthday. We ended up staying out longer than I thought." Her explanation wasn't unbelievable, but there was something in the way she avoided my eyes that made my stomach turn. Her phone kept buzzing, but she ignored every notification. I couldn't say exactly why, but something felt off, and that feeling didn't fade. In fact, it only got stronger as the days went by. Her coming home late became routine. Every time there was a new excuse: work dinners, last-minute invites, impromptu meetups. I tried to stay patient, to trust her, but each night chipped away at my peace of mind. Eventually, I couldn't stay silent anymore. After another one of her late returns, I asked her to sit down so we could talk. "Marissa," I said, my voice calm but firm, "something has to change. I need to understand why you're always out so late, and why I'm always left wondering." She folded her arms across her chest and gave me a look that was more defensive than concerned. "Travis, what exactly are you trying to say? I'm a grown woman. I don't have to check in every time I step out the door." "This isn't about control," I replied, trying to keep things from escalating. "It's about respect. We're married. I just want to know when to expect you or where you'll be. That's not unreasonable." She rolled her eyes and let out a bitter laugh. "If you trusted me, we wouldn't even be having this conversation." Her words hit me like a slap. "It's not that I don't trust you," I said, my jaw tight. "It's that lately it feels like I've become an afterthought, like your friends and these outings matter more than I do." We ended up arguing for nearly an hour, talking in circles, both of us trying to justify our feelings. By the end, she reluctantly agreed to scale back her nights out. But even as she said the words, I could tell something between us had shifted. For a couple of weeks, she made a visible effort, but the warmth was gone. She was there physically, but her heart wasn't. She stopped being affectionate. Conversations felt like chores. Then came the day I got my own promotion. It was a long-awaited win, not just professionally, but personally. I'd finally have more time to spend at home, something Marissa had told me we needed. I saw it as an opportunity to reconnect, to bring us back to where we once were. I planned a small surprise, a dinner, a quiet evening together. I just wanted to remind her of us. I came home early that night, easing open the front door in silence, hoping to catch her in a sweet moment of surprise. Instead, I froze when I heard her voice drifting from the kitchen. She was on the phone. I don't think he has any clue. He's been so buried in work. But we need to be more careful. My heart dropped. I couldn't breathe. I stood there, unable to move. Who was she talking to? What was she hiding? I walked into the kitchen without saying a word. She turned around, startled for a split second before forcing a smile. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, my voice steady but tight. She laughed awkwardly. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a coworker. We're organizing a surprise for someone's birthday." It was plausible enough, but the way she said it, too fast, too defensive, set off every alarm in my body. "Then why did it sound so secretive?" I asked. She let out a frustrated sigh. "Because it is a surprise, Travis. You're seriously overthinking this." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was imagining things. I backed off. "Sorry," I said quietly. "Maybe I read too much into it." But the truth is, I didn't. Not really. She managed a smile, but it never reached her eyes. "Seriously, it's nothing. Let's not blow this out of proportion, okay?" I gave a small nod, choosing to let it go, even as a tight coil of dread began winding itself around my chest and refused to let go. Over the next few weeks, the growing gap between us became impossible to overlook. She was always on her phone, smiling at messages I never got to see, staying up late texting someone else. I started to feel more like an observer in my own relationship than an active part of it. When she mentioned the upcoming holiday party her company was throwing, my unease spiked. "It's work-related, Travis," she said when I expressed concern. "All the key people will be there." "I'll be back early," she added, trying to reassure me. I relented, though every instinct told me something was off. The day of the event, I drove her out to a country house where the party was being held. Just as she stepped out of the car, my phone buzzed. It was an old friend calling to congratulate me on a promotion I hadn't even announced publicly. I stayed in the car to take the call, eyes trailing her as she walked up to the front door. That's when I saw him. A man stood waiting at the entrance, far too familiar in the way he greeted her. His hand found the small of her back as they slipped inside together. My stomach turned. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being irrational, but the image stayed with me, etched into my mind. When I got home later that night, the unease only intensified. Her laptop was open on the desk in our study, unattended. A part of me knew this was my moment to seek the truth. But a traffic pileup had delayed me, and by the time I walked through the door, I was too exhausted to do anything but collapse onto the couch. That's when I heard the knock. I opened the door to find Ophelia, Marissa's younger sister, standing there. Her skin was pale, her eyes scanning the shadows like she expected someone to be chasing her. "Ophelia? What are you doing here?" I asked, confused. "Can I come inside?" she asked, her voice barely steady. I stepped aside, watching as she paced the room, hands twisting nervously in front of her. "What's going on?" I asked, my concern rising. "Is something wrong?" She paused, looking away before meeting my gaze, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "Travis, I've been holding this in for too long. I can't keep quiet anymore." She hesitated, then dropped the truth I'd feared for weeks. "Marissa's been seeing someone else." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The ground beneath me might as well have vanished. This was Ophelia, the woman I had trusted like family for years, confirming the thing I had tried not to believe. Anger and heartbreak surged inside me. I had given everything to Marissa. Ophelia worked at the same company, which only made her confession harder to ignore. She described how Marissa's behavior had changed after she transferred to a new office. The new crowd she surrounded herself with was known for their reckless lifestyle. One guy in particular stood out, someone Ophelia had seen Marissa spending an unusual amount of time with. "That must be the guy I saw," I said, recalling a suspicious phone call I'd overheard. Ophelia gave a solemn nod. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but at the party, she faltered. "Tell me what you saw," I said, my voice low. They weren't being discreet, Travis. They were all over each other, whispering, laughing, acting like no one else was in the room. She drew a shaky breath. "I saw them kiss. After that, they went upstairs. Together." I clenched my fists. The betrayal felt corrosive, eating away at everything we'd built. The woman I thought I knew had shattered everything with her lies. I thanked Ophelia, though her words tore me apart. Then I walked straight to the study and opened Marissa's laptop. I needed proof, and I found it. The evidence was right there. Group messages mocking me behind my back, flirtatious and obscene exchanges with the coworker, carefully coded plans, inside jokes at my expense. It was irrefutable, cruel, devastating. I shut the laptop and stared blankly ahead, my mind a whirlwind of fury and disbelief. Then, without warning, a memory surfaced, something I hadn't thought of in years. Before Marissa and I had become a couple, there had been a fleeting moment between Ophelia and me. It never developed. Marissa had swept in with her usual charisma and pulled me into her orbit. At the time, I hadn't questioned it. But now, I couldn't help but wonder, had I made the wrong choice? I looked across the room. Ophelia was still there, anxious yet quietly present. I stood, grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet, and poured 2 glasses. "To seeing things clearly," I muttered. "To honesty," she replied softly. We stayed up for hours, talking about Marissa, the lies, the years I'd spent trying to salvage something already broken. Ophelia opened up too. She'd always believed Marissa was manipulative, always taking what she wanted without thought for the consequences. She couldn't stay silent any longer. The whiskey blurred the edges, made it easier to speak the things we'd buried. Feelings we'd both pushed aside began to surface. The conversation took on a rawness neither of us expected, and slowly, painfully, it led us to each other. That night, we ended up in bed. Morning broke with a scream. Marissa stood in the doorway, her face contorted with rage. "What the hell is this?" I sat up, the haze of sleep lifting, but my regret never came. "It's exactly what it looks like." She glanced from me to Ophelia, who grabbed a blanket, her cheeks burning with shame. Tears welled up in Marissa's eyes. "How could you? With my sister?" The words escaped me as I rose from the bed, collected and deliberate, locking eyes with her. I wouldn't let her twist the narrative. "Don't play the wounded party, Marissa. You know exactly what you've done. The affair with your coworker? That secret's been out for a while now. You broke our vows, and now you stand there indignant?" Her fury flickered, giving way to fear. "Travis, please, I can explain," she stuttered. "It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything." "Don't waste your breath," I interrupted, my voice cutting through the room. I'd seen the texts. I knew about the night of that party. You made your choices, Marissa. Now I'm making mine. She collapsed into a chair, consumed by guilt, shoulders trembling with every sob. "Travis, I'm begging you, don't give up on us. I'll resign. We can fix this, I swear. Just don't walk away like this." But I didn't waver. My tone was cool, unshakable. "You ended this the moment you chose someone else. There's no going back." Then Marissa turned her rage elsewhere, toward Ophelia. Her desperation sharpened into venom. "And you? How could you do this to me? You're my own sister!" Ophelia didn't flinch. She met Marissa's stare with unwavering strength. And how could you do what you did to Travis? You treated him like he didn't matter. You expected me to keep quiet? You don't get to be the victim now. You did this to yourself." Marissa didn't say another word. She spun around and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. After that confrontation, I didn't hesitate. I packed my things that very night. It wasn't impulsive. I simply couldn't remain in a home built on broken trust. I rented a small apartment in the heart of the city, modest, but it gave me space to breathe, to reset, to begin again. Not long after, I called Marissa to let her know I was filing for divorce. Her reaction took me off guard. "No, Travis, please," her voice cracked. "We can talk this through. We can still fix it." "Fix it?" I echoed, the chill in my tone undeniable. "This wasn't a slip-up, Marissa. You shattered the foundation of everything we built." "It wasn't like that," she insisted. "It was just a moment of stupidity. I wasn't thinking. I love you. I just needed to feel something different for a moment." She wanted to reduce her betrayal to a moment of weakness, like it was a harmless mistake. The words struck me like a blow to the chest. She tried to make it sound small, inconsequential, something forgettable. I ended the call in silence. I wasn't going to get pulled into a debate over the phone, but I did agree to meet face to face. Not for closure, just to settle the details. We met at a quiet little cafe, one we used to visit in the early days. The irony hung heavy in the air. We kept the conversation civil at first, dividing property, outlining next steps, finalizing the paperwork. I held on to hope that we could handle this with maturity. But then she shifted. She leaned forward, eyes lit with a strange intensity. "Travis, have you ever thought about how the world is changing?" I narrowed my eyes. "What's your point?" "People don't love the way they used to," she said. "Relationships are evolving. Open marriages, non-monogamy. It works for so many couples now. Maybe we just need to try something different." I stared at her, stunned. "You're really trying to pass your affair off as some kind of progressive lifestyle choice?" She nodded, hopeful. "Exactly. A fresh start. No more lies, just structure and honesty. We could make it work." That was it. I stood, my chair scraping the floor behind me. "It's over, Marissa," I said, resolute. "You don't get to rewrite betrayal as some kind of modern enlightenment. I'm not buying it." Her face darkened. As I walked away, I heard her hiss under her breath. "You'll regret this." From that moment, everything changed. The apologies dried up. Bitterness took their place. What started as pleas for forgiveness turned into full-blown legal warfare. She fought over everything, every asset, every term. She even tried to use my bond with Ophelia against me in court. But I held firm. I had the truth and the evidence. I stayed composed, let my lawyer handle the chaos, and trusted the process. After months of drawn-out hearings and emotional exhaustion, the divorce was finalized. We split everything down the middle. And just like that, Marissa became a closed chapter in my life. Ophelia, though, she never left my side. Her loyalty never faltered. With her, I found clarity again. Time spent with her felt simple, honest, and slowly, something began to rebuild, something authentic, a real connection, a new beginning. What started as simple encounters, grabbing a bite to eat, wandering through quiet streets, gradually transformed into something deeper, something undeniably real. Without consciously deciding, Ophelia and I found ourselves sharing a home. It didn't feel forced or rushed. Instead, it was as though destiny had gently reopened a door we thought was permanently closed. Predictably, Marissa's reaction was explosive. She flooded my phone with angry texts, hurling accusations of betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me. I let the messages go unanswered. Marissa had forfeited any right to influence my choices or disturb the calm I was beginning to rebuild. Living with Ophelia brought a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. There was no pressure to define our connection or put a label on it. We were both navigating carefully, still carrying the emotional residue of the wreckage Marissa had left behind. And yet, beneath the surface, there was an unspoken understanding, a quiet intimacy rooted in honesty and mutual regard. For the first time in years, I could envision a future that felt not just possible, but worth hoping for. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.